From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. I've got a lot on my mind today. Not sure how much I'll get to. I think this week I will take the weekend show and use it as kind of an extension of this show. Sometimes I do that. So in your feed, this episode drops Thursday morning. Check your feed for maybe as early as Friday morning, but soon, for the Charles Purcell Presents half hour, which is usually nonsense and radio theater and fun stuff, but sometimes I devote it just to a monologue to augment what's happening here on the log because there's just too much to get to. So I think I'll do that this week. So watch for that in your feed. On the radio side, the Charles Purcell Presents program airs at various times beginning on Sunday. So check your local listings. Okay, well, the big midweek news was the oral arguments heard at the Supreme Court. It looks very much, according to the people who know these things, they listen to the hearings. They can sort of tell by the tone of the questions which way the court is leaning. It pretty much looks like they're going to put the final nails in the coffin of the Voting Rights Act. That's pretty much just over. So, it's all part of the one big story, complete authoritarian one-party rule. The worst-case scenario, and not at all unlikely, that red states will take advantage of this ruling, go crazy with gerrymandering as early as the next election, the 2026 midterms. If the decision is handed down early enough, which I guess the parties have asked for, there will be time to draw new maps before the 2026 midterms. And some estimates are as high as 19 Democratic seats will be lost, making the Republican majority in the House of Representatives permanent for the foreseeable future. And that's exactly what they want. The gerrymandering we've seen so far won't even compare to the madness of gerrymandering we'll see if the court comes down the way experts fear. North Carolina is in the process right now. The voting has begun in California to try to offset some of those seats in a kind of a tit-for-tat brouhaha here. We don't know how the California vote's going to turn out. I looked it up to check the polling. It's favored in the polls, but not by a lot. So we really don't know. Early voting has begun. Also, regarding voting, because there are many fronts to this assault, of course, voter suppression laws passed in dozens of states. Interesting and really disturbing piece in The Guardian by Ellen Weintraub, a former FEC commission, Federal Election Commission, detailing how the FEC has been rendered pretty much non-existent by the authoritarian Miller-Vogt regime. I think there's supposed to be 6 commissioners. There are only 2 commissioners as we speak. Not even enough for a quorum. They literally can't do their work. There is no cop on the beat enforcing election law. That's what the FEC does. So it's the Wild West. It's wide open. I wish I had better news for you. Just a couple quick words about Israel. On the last episode, our first chance to talk about the so-called peace deal, I was trying to give it the benefit of the doubt as much as I could. I was trying to be moderate in my comments, at least hang back a little bit. Don't want to rain on the parade of people who are, especially families, who are having their loved ones returned to them after a couple of years as hostages. I can't even imagine how brutal that was and the joy and relief they felt over the weekend. So I tried not to be, too snarky, but good Lord, what a joke. Within 24 hours of the ceasefire, 6 Palestinians were shot dead by the Israeli Defense Forces. Hamas is now out in the light of day, fully armed, executing rival gangs. It's just one big hot mess. I don't know how you call any of this peace. Part of the deal was that Hamas had to return all the hostages, including the dead ones, but they can't find most of the dead ones because they're buried under the rubble caused by IDF bombs. So now Israel is using that as an excuse, the lack of all hostages returned, or at least the slow roll of it, because I guess they literally can't. You can't return a body you can't find. So Israel is using that as an excuse to cut aid in half. We're less than a week into this thing. Hamas is still armed. That's not going to change. They seem more emboldened than ever. We never saw Hamas out on the streets carrying their guns, hunting people down for the last 2 years, but we do now. As hostages are being returned, we're hearing horror stories, including Palestinian hostages are telling horror stories of what they endured at the hands of their Israeli captors. Yeah, the media keeps calling them Palestinian prisoners for some reason. And I guess there were up to or close to a couple of thousand returned. That's a pretty big number. But many are reporting brutal beatings, bug-infested conditions, lack of food, lack of health care, just torture in every respect. Yeah. And on top of the 2,000, it's estimated that there are up to 11,000 Palestinian detainees overall. 11,000. Just scooped up off the streets, out of their homes during the genocide. Half of them held without any sort of trial, without any sort of evidence, just labeled as unlawful combatants. Hundreds of children and women among the so-called detainees. Yeah, we're getting toward the end of the year here. Detainee, I think, maybe should be a candidate for word of the year. Disgusting. The news coverage, the corporate news coverage here in the United States, wall to wall, Israeli hostages and their tearful families being reunited. Again, I tried to be respectful the last episode. I don't want to step on that. I still don't. All I want to do is point out the simple fact that there was, when it came to the 2,000 Palestinians reunited with their families, crickets. Did you see that on corporate media? Anywhere? And no mention, zero mention, of the 11,000 Palestinians still basically unaccounted for, held somewhere by the Israelis, in conditions we have no way of knowing, but not that tough to guess. It includes hundreds of women and children. So, not to be outdone on the violence front, the Orange Menace is stepping up his game in Venezuela for some godforsaken reason. Another boat blown out of the water, another 6 people killed. The total now is, I think it's 6 boats and 27 people. Forgive me if I've got that number a little off. I think that's what it is. 6 boats. They claim to be drug cartels. They give zero evidence. And we know their reputation for lying. And 27 people killed, who they claim are cartel members, are drug runners. Zero evidence is offered. These are war crimes. These are international crimes. These are crimes on the U.S. books. They're crimes any way you look at it. 27 murders. And he brags about it. He shows you the video. He shows you the snuff films. Co-dictator Stephen Miller, very proud of his work. He trots out the orange meat puppet to show the videos. The fascist Miller-Vogt regime is now openly threatening Argentina, telling their voters, telling their nation, that if their favored candidate doesn't win this upcoming election, they will retaliate with sanctions, with tariffs, withholding of international aid. Yeah, Yeah. The fascist Miller-Vogt regime is bullying Argentina and demanding that they elect the candidate of their choosing. And it's all one story. So while we're talking about the violence aspect of this, the use of American troops, we've seen just in the last week or so the escalation in Portland, in Chicago. We all know, I've got a friend out in Portland who reported this directly, and we knew it anyway. Yeah, before this all started, at the most, maybe a dozen. At the most, usually it was 5 or 6 people quietly protesting, just holding up signs across the street from the ICE facility. And now we see the escalation, all part of the plan. You and I have talked about it plenty. The Miller-Vogt regime is trying to entice violence. Scenes from Chicago are starting to look pretty dicey as citizens stand up to protect their neighbors against ICE Gestapo. There's some scuffling back and forth. There's some tear gas thrown. Violence definitely on the part of Gestapo ICE, throwing men, women, and children to the ground, hog-tying them, shooting them, literally shooting them with so-called non-lethal ammunition, pepper balls, etc. Zip ties around the wrists of children, the elderly, citizens, legal immigrants, non-criminal, undocumented, doesn't matter. And just a reminder, just so you know, the lie that they keep telling you is that this great 70+% of those they've detained are hardened criminals. The exact opposite is true. A tiny fraction are criminals at all. The great majority, up over 70%, have absolutely no criminal record. And those that have criminal records are for minor offenses, nonviolent. So just a reminder of that lie, so you don't, you hear a lie 12 times a day, and it's corrected. You hear the truth once. We got to even out this pattern, and I ask you to do the same. If this ever comes up in conversation, or if you happen to hear something on the news, and you look and maybe there's your kid sitting there doing their homework, say, "Did you hear what they just said on the news? That was a lie." It's really up to all of us to counter with the truth at every opportunity. So the troops are out there. They're in Portland. They're in Chicago. They're in Memphis. I'm looking forward to the day when the troops themselves, these National Guard troops, and God forbid the regular military, if and when they join the fray. I'm looking forward to the day when they stand up and say no. I'd like to read to you Article 92 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Quote, "Any individual who violates or fails to obey any lawful order or regulation shall be punished as a court-martial may direct." Now, the key part of this is the term lawful order, which directly implies that orders must be lawful to be obligatory. So if military members are required to obey lawful orders, but not unlawful ones, that means they must refuse illegal orders. Now, it's important to note that this interpretation of the code has been reinforced many times. A Supreme Court case in 1969 found that a soldier is not a robot. He is a person. The duty does not compel a soldier to follow an order that he knows or should know is illegal. So a member of the military is not only required to follow lawful orders, but is expected, basically required, to not follow unlawful orders. It's not just an option. It's also reinforced in the Department of Defense Law War Manual. Section 6.1 states, "Armed forces personnel are obligated to follow only lawful orders. An order that infringes upon law or is unlawful must not be followed." When you make your phone calls and write your letters to your representatives, please remind them of this. And I'm really looking forward to the day when military leaders and the rank and file stand up and just say no to this nonsense. While we're in the Pentagon, there's some good news. The order that you and I have talked about, and I'm sure you heard about on the news, Pete Hegseth ordered members of the press covering the Pentagon to only file stories that are approved by the Pentagon. They had to sign a pledge. And guess what? Nobody did. Well, take that back. One outlet did. Guess. No, not Fox. Nope. One America News Network. The only outlet that signed this stupid pledge. The rest of them, everybody, the networks, the cable guys, AP, even Fox, even Newsmax, NPR, PBS, everybody, all of them refused. In fact, CNN, Fox News, NBC, ABC, and CBS issued a joint statement rejecting Pete Hegseth's pledge demand. Quote, "We join virtually every other news organization in declining to agree to the Pentagon's new requirements, which would restrict journalists' ability to keep the nation and the world informed of important national security issues. The policy is without precedent and threatens core journalistic protections. We will continue to cover the U.S. military, as each of our organizations has done for many decades, upholding the principles of a free and independent press." Well, how about that? A little bit of good news. Something else that made some headlines midweek. This is a crazy story. Politico reporting. They got their hands on thousands of private messages between young GOP leaders, young Republicans. And these aren't just kids sitting in their mom's basement. No, these are leaders of the youth movement in the GOP. They're heading up state organizations. One of them is a state senator. And the messages in these chats are shocking, even by today's standards. It's hard for me to even read this out loud. I'm looking at the Politico article right now. They referred to black people as monkeys and the watermelon people. They mused about putting their political opponents in gas chambers. They talked about raping their enemies and driving them to suicide, and lauded Republicans who they believed support slavery. And again, these aren't just kids. William Hendricks, the Kansas Young Republicans vice chair, used the N-word multiple times. Bobby Walker, the vice chair of the New York State Young Republicans, referred to rape as, quote, epic. Peter Ginta, who at the time was chair of the New York State Young Republicans, wrote in a message, quote, "Everyone that votes no is going to the gas chamber." He was referring to an upcoming vote on whether he should become chair of the Young Republican National Federation. That's the GOP's 15,000-member political organization for Republicans between 18 and 40 years old. Again, these are not just kids. These are people in the leadership of the Republican Party. Joe Maligno, identified as the general counsel for the New York State Young Republicans, wrote, quote, "Can we fix the showers? Gas chambers don't fit the Hitler aesthetic." Annie Kakati, New York's National Committee member, said, "I'm ready to watch people burn now." The group chat members spoke freely about the pressure to cow to Trump to avoid becoming called a rhino. J.D. Vance was asked about it, said they were kids doing stupid things, called them edgy, offensive jokes. He said on social media, "I refuse to join the pearl clutching." Yeah. No condemnation, no shock, no nothing. They're just kids. He did not see the young Republicans' message as warranting outrage. Sure, they were offensive, but, typical adolescent behavior. I don't know. I was an adolescent. Were you an adolescent? Did you ever say you loved Hitler? Or any other of the vile things I don't care to repeat? Yeah, J.D. Vance. Good for you, bud. A couple of words on the shutdown. Well, it's pretty clear now. In fact, I think he's even said it out loud. Speaker Mike Johnson is not going to call the House back into session. It's been out since September 19th. And he's not going to call it back until the shutdown is over. So the House is closed indefinitely. They're still getting paid, but they've literally got a closed sign on the door. They're not doing business. He refuses to swear in Adelita Grijalva, who was elected more than, I think, 3 weeks ago now. So just refusing to swear her in for no reason. Well, the reason everyone thinks is because she'll be the 218th signature on the discharge petition forcing a vote on releasing the Epstein files. But you and I don't need to talk about that anymore. Co-dictator Russell Vogt is taking advantage of the shutdown, of course, to conduct mass firings. All or most of them illegal. And just like in the Elon Musk dodgy days, they're being done carelessly, sometimes within 24 hours. After getting their email notification of termination, they get a second email saying, oops, nope, turns out we need you. So there's another hot mess. Here's something really I find disturbing that's not being said in this whole thing. Well, the Democrats want to extend subsidies for the ACA benefits that are set to expire. ACA, the Affordable Care Act. Okay, we all understand that. And most Americans agree that those benefits should be extended. That's really why the shutdown is happening, because the repugnants are demanding that Democrats sign on to a bill that allows the benefits to expire, and a bill that had no Democratic Party input, exactly zero input. Anyway, so we all know that. And most Americans agree that the benefits should be extended. Here's the part that's not being said. When all that money goes from the federal government through the Affordable Care Act to pay for those extended benefits, where does the money actually go? Does it go in your pocket? Well, if so, not for long. Just long enough for you to take it out and give it to the healthcare industry. So this is why I'm always complaining about Democratic bills. Yes, they're designed to help people, which it does, because insurance premiums are going to double and triple without these extensions. So of course, it helps people. But what the Democrats never do is anything to reduce those costs in the first place. What Bernie wants to do. Prevent the health insurance industry from gouging us at every opportunity. Everybody, repugnants, Democrats, independents, everybody just seems to be taking this as a fact. They're just taking it for granted that costs somehow need to be this high. Well, we can't do anything to reduce costs at the source. Health providers and their partners in crime in the health insurance industry are just going to continue to jack up prices through the roof. Okay, fine. I guess there's nothing we can do about that. But my constituents are telling me, oh, they can't afford it. They'll either go bankrupt or they'll have no insurance. Okay, so we'll subsidize. Whenever you hear the word subsidy, that money's not going to you. That money is going to the CEO of United Health. That's the part of the story that it's never told. It's kind of obvious. But it's just, like I say, it's a given for everybody. It's just a given. It's the air we breathe. It's the water we swim in. It's just so there all the time that nobody bothers to notice anymore. And good, solid, right-thinking liberals praise the Democratic Party for helping the little guy by giving billions of dollars to the insurance cartels. And in the same interview, you'll hear them bend over backwards to refute the lie, the repugnant lie, that undocumented immigrants, which they call illegals, undocumented immigrants are getting all this money for their health insurance. They're getting the Democrats want to spend billions of dollars to give health care to what they call illegals. And of course it's a lie. Of course it's a lie. And once again, the Democrats do everything they can to refute the lie. They bend over backwards to say over and over again that undocumented immigrants are not eligible for government health insurance. But they never say the next thing that I want to hear. Well, even though we're not spending a dime on them, we ought to, because everyone should have health care. Every living, breathing person in the United States, regardless of their immigration status, should have health care because it's a basic human right. But they never add that little nugget because they can't. Because they're Democrats. So in the whole shutdown conversation, those two things are just driving me crazy. Somehow, both repugnants and Democrats seem to agree that the private insurance industry somehow deserves to make billions of dollars off of people suffering. They also seem to agree that undocumented immigrants somehow don't have a right to health care. Yeah. All right, before we go, I hope you've made your plans for Saturday, October 18th. Here we are. It's here. There is absolutely a major event very close to you. I can guarantee it. Saturday, October 18th, No Kings Rally. All right. As I said, there's a lot on my mind this week. I'm going to take the Charles Purcell Presents half hour to talk with you a little more. So check out your feed. I'm not exactly sure, maybe as early as Friday morning. Certainly at least over the weekend for sure. Again, those on the radio side, Sunday, and then various times afterwards. Okay, there it is for today. As always, check us out on your favorite podcast platform at charlespurcell.com. Find us on Substack and Blue Sky. Our home radio station is River West Radio in Milwaukee, and Peter Donalds wrote and performed our theme song. All right. I love you. I'll see you out there.